that Thursday morning, Sunday.
Are you not going to that one?
I've given up on Friday. It's just. I tell you, that's the plane ticket. And then we look really good. I set up for the dogs. I think it's Cambridge.
Evening, Howard.
Hey, Howard, how's it going?
Live stream is active, so that tech wise,
Good to go.
it's good.
That was Prince, you know, like I do what his old office look like, I don't know.
All right. All right, we will go. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. It is 5:45 PM on February 23rd, 2026. Hillary, will you call the roll, please?
Forced,
Present.
Eaton,
Here.
Hinders,
Here.
Thompson, Steiger, Samuelson.
Here. All right, we have quorum, so we're gonna keep on rolling. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or things they would like to see modified in the agenda, or can I have a motion to approve the agenda as is?
Eden motions. Second Andrews.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the agenda passed. And then we're gonna get an approval of the minutes from our last meeting on February 9th, 2026. If anybody has any comments, please share them. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Thompson motions.
Forrest will second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Our next item, number 5, is the welcome of guests and public comment. If anybody has anything that they'd like to say that is not on tonight's agenda, now would be the time. Anything you want to talk about and it's something that's on the agenda tonight?
Just came to
You
listen.
just gonna listen. Okay. Elliot, is there anybody online by chance?
I do not believe so. Although we do have Dan. I don't know if Dan has a comment on anything not on the agenda, but he's welcome to unmute and speak if so.
Right. All right. I think we're good. We're going to move on to item number 6, which is a public hearing and recommendation on a zoning amendment to change all R1 zone lots in plats David Gordon Heights, Westwood Estates plats 1 and 2, and Norwalk Knolls plats 1, 2, and 3 from R1 single family to residential to RF Founders Residential. The time is 5:47 and we will open the public hearing at this time. Elliot, would you be like to brief us?
Yes, and I'm gonna say a lot of things, so hopefully I cover everything that is involved with this amendment. We have the staff report that was in the agenda packet for tonight. We also did an open house last week for everybody who lives in this affected area who wanted to come and ask questions. Sometimes the zoning and governmental stuff is confusing, so we wanted to give folks an opportunity to come and be open about what we're intending to do in this area. So I have a presentation that we gave at that open house that I might touch on as well. So this proposed zoning amendment covers this whole area within, I've got City Hall outlined as well, but all of the properties within this turquoise polygon, you'll probably notice if you were to drill down into it, that this is not every structure within those plats, but these are all of the lots that are zoned R1 single family residential. On the east side of this polygon, there's a smattering of R2, R3, R4, and some commercial parcels as well. Those are being left alone. This is single family residential only. And so really what this request stems from is we've gotten over the years the occasional request from property owners who developed prior to the modern iteration of our zoning ordinance. We did an amendment around 1990 that kind of is the zoning we have today. Little things have changed here and there, but by and large, that 1990 code is what we see in our current code. Prior to that, development was done under a different set of standards. And one of those standards deals with where accessory buildings get placed on a lot. South of City Hall is what is commonly known as the Founders District. That's already zoned RF. It was zoned that way. The creation of that zoning class back in what year, 2013?
Like 14, 15 probably.
15. That district was created to accommodate lots that were developed under old zoning codes, so that if you were to tear down an accessory building that was built in a location no longer permissible, you could do that and then reconstruct it where it was. So if you had a garage slab that was still stable, you could tear down the existing building, put up a brand new one in the same spot, and still abide by code. That zoning class was really only applied to the area south of City Hall, but it wasn't the only area of town that developed under old zoning codes. That photo on the wall is a pretty good example of properties that were built prior to our modern zoning regulations. So the primary differences between R1, the existing zoning class, and RF, I'm going to hope that this all loads. I put in there kind of the two sections and the things within them that differ. One of these is about the keeping of chickens. That's not really germane to the discussion tonight, but I included it for thoroughness' sake. The main differences between R1 and RF is that in R1, you're required to have a 2-car garage with certain dimensional details. And then in RF, you're allowed to have a 1-car garage with single family home. The other differences really are just in the setback tables. So the one that I have here is from the R1 category. There are certain variations of R1 throughout the community. Out in Blooming Heights and Timberview, there's a lot of R180 where the lot width minimum is 80 feet. We have some R1 100 out there. Similarly, lot width minimum of 100 feet and some modified setbacks therein. RF, from a bulk regs standpoint, really was designed to reflect the way the older parts of town developed. So if you go south of City Hall, get out a measuring tape and find out where the front of a house is relative to the property line. A lot of them are going to be 25 feet. A lot of them are going to have narrower rear yard setbacks, and they're also going to be closer to the corners. So those are basically the only differences between R1 and RF zoning classes. Everything that I have omitted from that comparison on those 3 pages in the staff report is identical word for word. So RF was created modeled off of the old R1, but to help deal with some of those unique aspects of older properties. And so the request here really is to take this area of town, which was developed around the same time. It's not as old as the Founders District, of course. But to give the folks that have, garages that are 3 feet from the property line, or at least under 5 feet, an opportunity to rebuild them, invest in their properties again, and just kind of lessen the burden so that they don't have to tear out their whole slab, move it 2 feet, and then rebuild it. That adds another $5,000, $8,000 to the cost of that type of construction. This particular agenda item is really precipitated by one individual who approached city council with a request related to this. He's not the only person that we've heard from over the years dealing with this kind of issue. In the past, folks have called my office usually, and I've told them, nope, you can't do that. I don't know that necessarily that's right. I feel like it's a good idea to try to open the box for folks that are facing that kind of thing. To put a little bit of a visual onto it, in our presentation, Luke made this. This is a comparison of on the left, that would be what an R1 lot currently permits. So it'd be a 30-foot front yard setback, 35 rear yard setback. Side setbacks we're not too worried about with the main house on this, but an accessory building can be built within 5 feet of the side and rear property line. So that orange box, you can't fill that orange box with accessory buildings, but you can place a shed, garage, greenhouse within a certain amount of square feet anywhere within that box. The Founders District on the right, Luke illustrated these pretty much to scale. That would reduce the front yard setback to 25 feet, the rear yard setback to 25 feet, and then that accessory structure buildable area increases by 2 feet on. Right. So that's the fundamental difference. And this will, like I said, allow people to renovate easier and give them more latitude with their properties. One of the primary things that we talked about at the open house was separation requirements for fire code. Some of you might know that 10 feet is the typical separation for not requiring a firewall. If you're to build structures closer than that, a firewall is required. That's a thing that could come up if someone builds 3 feet from the property line and the neighbor wants to do the same thing. We, as a department, Luke, myself, and our inspectors are going to need to keep an eye on where people are building these things. If somebody tears down a garage that's 3 feet from the property line and it didn't have a firewall, now it's going to need. So that's a responsibility that we will have to take. We can't do anything really in the zoning code for that. That's a building code requirement. Luke, have I left anything out?
I think you've covered it all.
Hopefully that sums up the situation. I'm happy to answer any questions now or after public comment.
If the firewall situation would come up, like say AJ wants to tear his down, but mine is still staying 3 feet his builds, like, do we both have to build the firewall or
Just the new.
Just him. So it's only retroactively, you won't have to do anything. But if he took his down and then you wanted to build a new one and not do a firewall, then you're going to have to be we're going to have 10 feet of total separation. So you'd have to be 8 feet away then at that point, instead of 5 is what we would have said in the past. So there, again, Elliot said there's not really a way to write that in the zoning. It's just going to have to be something as we evaluate all those site plans for garages and sheds that we keep an eye to, so we make sure the right situation is constructed.
Just to add on to that, the approval of this amendment would compel no one to do anything to their property.
There's nobody would have to go back and retrofit or bring their property back. That would leave everything as is. It makes it easier for somebody wanting to rebuild their garage. Basically.
So they could leave it the same dimensions as the 1 car garage, or if they wanted to get fancy, they could
Yeah, they could
bring it
expand
up
it.
to date.
Yep.
We are going to ask for public comment this time. So if there's anybody in person or online that would like to make a comment on the item in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Okay, not hearing anything for anybody online or in person. We will move on and we will go to questions from the commission. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions from staff?
You said this was prompted by one person coming before city council. You mentioned there were those in the past. Is that something that, it's just a general question. Have those people who in the past you've said no to, have they done changes? Have they just let it sit? Would you go to them and say, hey, we've now passed this? You can.
Right.
Well, those folks should be aware that this is on the table, because I sent a letter to everybody who is in that polygon. I think what we tend to tell people is we as staff have said no to your thing. If you would like to see an amendment to code that would permit it, come to council, ask them to give staff direction to look for a solution. And that's where we've wound up with here. Nobody else in the past has decided to do that. And another thing that I didn't mention is, let's say that guy said, well, can I go to the Board of Adjustment and request a variance to rebuild my garage or shed in a spot? The Board of Adjustment should deny that. Won't go into the legalese of it, but that gentleman also could say, well, why not just rezone my property? Well, you don't want to do just one, because that's a spot zoning and that's just considered bad planning practice. That's the kind of thing that Jim Doherty would say, like, no, if you're going to do this for one guy, do it for everybody around him too, so that right to build in that way is shared.
For the properties adjacent to this outline, was there any feedback or comments from those folks regarding the change?
I fielded a bunch of phone calls about this. I think all of them were from within the polygon, because every phone call I received was in response to the open house letter, which only went to the people inside this.
Yeah.
The letter for today's meeting went to folks within 200 feet of this as well.
Were there other?
Mostly just info gathering. I don't recall anybody expressing much of an opinion on this in my correspondence. Almost all of it was on the phone.
How was the open house? Did you have a lot of people? Did you have a lot of?
We had 5 people at the open house. One was a couple, so 4 households were represented. Most of that conversation with them dealt with fire separation, potential for drainage, questions about drainage issues. I guess kind of the motivations for why this is being considered by council.
That staff's request, I attended that and that's a pretty good summary. There was, I think most of the questions were related, we're about the 3-foot to 5-foot setback for accessory structures. And I think staff did a great job of clarifying why we were doing this and kind of the impetus for it and rank. I think everybody left the meeting with an understanding of what we were trying to accomplish with this. I guess the way that I view it is that now if you build a house in Norwalk, you've got to build a 2-car attached garage, right? That's just part of the rules. Whereas when these neighborhoods were all developed, a lot of those houses were built without garages, period, right? And so this is basically, I think, in my mind, it's resetting the code in these neighborhoods to allow for things that we would have allowed essentially when they were established. So kind of rewinding the clock and kind of resetting that in my mind.
And this is the same as what is just founders already. Nothing's funky.
And just, yes.
In the side-by-side example, it looks like we stretched out the boundaries for these accessory structure building areas. Why was that? Why is that necessary to shrink that from 5 to 3, which kind of shrinks that space in between?
So the reason that this is on the table is the gentleman who came and spoke to us about rebuilding his garage. It currently is 3 feet from the lot line. So under the current rules, if he were to tear that down, or if it were to be destroyed by a tornado or a fire, he would have to move it 2 feet into his lot.
But do we know of other structures similar Or
Yeah.
3 feet, or is there
There's a
a
pond.
variant of?
I
Yeah,
drove around that neighborhood before we had the public meeting and it seemed like most folks that had garages back there were probably below 5 feet. There's a lot of 3 feet. I guess one of the things I think that got brought up was, I had an older house. When I lived in West Des Moines, I had an older house and like my driveway, I wouldn't have had to replace, but if I were gonna rebuild my garage, all of a sudden my garage, my driveway, I gotta either redo it all or I gotta kink it when it gets to the garage because my driveway's already pretty at the property line kind of a deal. So I think it makes sense to allow folks to basically rebuild in the condition that they've got and to keep that 3 foot setback. It kind of matches with that character of homes that have the detached garages. Like one of the other comments that was brought up where was a potential, just an evaluation of property values, but in my mind, I guess I would say that it makes it easier to rebuild what you've already got, or it makes it easier to build an accessory structure. So it makes it a little bit easier to do things, maybe, but it's not gonna hurt your property values.
And this is only for accessory structures though? So like if a house would catch on fire, they would still have to change the setback when they were,
Their front and rear setbacks would change to this one, would be reduced. So now, like,
well,
if a
not,
house,
not quite.
not quite,
This is like detail beyond
yeah,
this request. There's a rather obscure piece of code that I learned about less than a year ago. That regardless of how city code changes, for a principal structure, your front setback is whatever your plat says. So we're reducing, in theory, the front setback from 30 to 25 feet. But if these plat documents say 30 feet, you still have to build, and that's just for the front setback. So the side setback would be 7.5, and then it would be 25 to the rear. So that's the one setback aside from the 3 and 5 feet that would change. Everything else would remain the way it appears on the plat.
any more questions or deliberation or comments from the commission? Okay. Not hearing anything. Thanks, staff, for the comments and the response to the questions. We're going to officially close the public hearing now at 6:05 PM. And now there's a little bit more time if the commission wants to deliberate or any further discussion on this item.
are there other parts of town that this may eventually go to as well? Like I know Lakewood has a lot of maybe older homes.
I could see like this area between Cherry and Highway 28 potentially doing that. It was developed at kind of a similar time as the area we're talking about tonight. Lakewood certainly has areas where that's possible. I think the one thing we would have to do maybe a little research on as staff is look at the date Lakewood was annexed versus, which I honestly don't know precisely when that was. But like that date versus when properties were developed to see if like they were developed in the county or in the city first. So Lakewood could be,
Like Lakewood was all county for the most part. Maybe a little bit down the west end of it,
some of
but
the western ones were done in the 90s, but
Thanks for the discussion. I would, at this point in time, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval or the denial to the city council.
Then we'll recommend a approval to city council. Is that
Eden, second.
Okay, Hillary, would you call the roll?
Hinders,
Yes.
Thompson,
aye?
Forst,
Aye.
sorry, Eden,
Aye.
Samuelson.
Aye. Motion to recommend approval of the zoning amendment goes on to council. And that wraps up item number 6. We will now move on to item number 7, a public hearing and recommendation on a zoning amendment related to the bulk regulations for accessory structures in RE1, single-family rural estates, R1 single-family residential, and RF founders residential zoning districts, and an amendment to the zoning ordinance, chapter 175A.29.2 accessory buildings in residential zoning districts. We're gonna open up the public hearing at 6:08 PM. And then I will ask Elliot for a briefing.
I think we've set a single meeting record for the most words per agenda item in my time here. And I'm very proud of that. I'll do my best to explain this one. I may need to lean on Luke a little bit. So this is related to the previous thing, but it's broader. This is not confined to any one geography in the city of Norwalk. But we have observed that in the current Founders District, in this neighborhood that we just had the amendment about, some of Windflower, some of that area between Highway 28 and Cherry, folks have had some concerns about the amount of square footage their accessory buildings are allowed to have. And so Luke and I spent a pretty good amount of time in his office just brain powering this thing to see what we could do to help accommodate some folks if they wanted to build bigger accessory buildings. So when I get an application from someone to build detached garage, shed, greenhouse, etc., I'm required to look at a few things. One of them is setbacks. Those are pretty straightforward. In general, 5 feet from the rear and side lot lines. Don't be in a stormwater easement. That part's not too challenging. The second thing I need to look at is the size in square footage of that building. The 5th page of the staff report identifies what those square footage caps are in the RE1, R1, and RF zoning districts. Residents can apply to the Board of Adjustment for a special use permit if they want to exceed that. So in that case, their neighbors would get a letter and would be able to come to a public meeting to talk about it. But essentially, that's a soft cap, if you will. There's just an extra step involved if you want to exceed those numbers. The third thing that I look at, and this doesn't really come up very much because the math of all of these setbacks and size regs kind of makes it unnecessary, is just how much of a lot area accessory buildings can take up. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you're allowed to have 1,000 square feet of accessory building per this 10% rule that we have currently. We also have a second thing on there that says accessory buildings will not be more than 30% of the area of the rear yard. You would need a shockingly large building to hit that number on almost any property. Luke and I ran the numbers, and it's that 10% number that actually is a little bit more limiting, depending on the lot that you're building on. Aside from the 1,500 in RE1 and then the 1,000 in R1 and RF, both of those pieces of code are identical. And so we were exploring the idea of not so much changing those, but this last line. So it reads slightly different, but it more or less means the same thing. In no instance shall the accessory structure exceed the principal structure in gross building floor area. The way that we've interpreted that in the past is looking from the top down. Your detached building should not be bigger than your house. That's the way that we've treated it since the beginning of time. But there are areas in town where you have houses that are not 1,000 square feet. Does it make sense to limit someone with an 800 square foot house to an 800 square foot building when by right, maybe their neighbor can have a 1,000 square foot building? We don't think that necessarily makes sense. We have had to tell people that they are restricted in their accessory building size because of that last line. So we thought it was worth contemplating just taking out that last line and just using the square footage limiter and the percent lot coverage instead. We are proposing changing that lot coverage from 10% to 20%. We found after running some numbers that would help alleviate some size restrictions more so than that rear yard coverage of 30%. The second part of this amendment is just correcting a text error. In our general zoning code, there's a really long paragraph that talks about accessory buildings in single-family districts. Or rather, districts where single family can be built, because you can build single family in R2. And it refers to RTC. We are 99% sure that it means RF, but
I did go back and looked at some notes. That was RTC was the original name we came up for when we were writing everything. And a council member wanted to call the RF because that's kind of the district it was known as, the founders district. So we changed it from TC to F, but we missed it for 10 years. We've missed it in that one section. So
and I don't want to start denying people in RF permission to do things because this says RTC. That seems silly. So that's just cleaning up a textual error. In my explanation of the first part of this, does that make sense? Questions?
Makes sense.
Elliot, did you hit on, so this is related to the gentleman's request at city council for the last item too. You did hit on that.
For context, can you, like, 1,000 square feet, a 3-car garage is what, 750?
Ish.
Okay, so just trying to get some context when we're talking like size wise for.
Yeah.
Detached structures. Okay.
So, and in that gentleman's situation, he has a smaller ranch home, I believe. And, you know, wanting to do an accessory structure that's garage plus workshop plus, you know, people do a lot more in their garages these days than park cars. So, that's where his request came from.
You mentioned, like, looking down at the footprint. Is there something about how tall it can be? Cause if you have like a ranch and you've got something, a monolith over top of it.
Yes, the height limit in the residential districts is 15 feet. You can apply for a special use permit to exceed that. And we have had people do that in the last few years. Just a handful, most of them, I think we've only had 2 actually. I think they're both in Stonebridge.
Yeah, it tended to be for folks doing RV storage, getting a higher height door. So their structure had to be a little bit taller.
Are there any, we are doing a public hearing here, so are there any comments or questions from the general public about this item?
He's still on or not, but.
Hearing nothing for comment from the public. Any more questions from the commission for staff before we close the public hearing? Is that 15 feet? Is that to the eve? I'm sorry. I don't know.
I think it's to the midpoint.
Yeah, there's some, yeah, it's basically you go to the peak. Depending on roof type, there's different ones, but in your traditional peak, your 15 feet is the midpoint between the peak and the eaves. So yeah.
I'm assuming this will make your guys' jobs a little bit easier when looking at accessory structures for a lot of these things, or make it more difficult.
No, I mean, I don't know, from Elliot does the review, like we had a big discussion about, is this something that, because again, it's a reaction to a council direction on something. I'm pretty neutral on it. I don't have a problem enforcing the code as it was. I think I probably end up more on the side of let people do more with their property in general. So I'd probably be like, yeah, this is a fine thing. Elliot, you can kind of speak to the review side of it.
I mean, from the review side, it's just gonna change what I tell people. I have no problem letting somebody know if what they want to do would be denied or not. Usually what I do with this sort of thing is give guidance, and then typically I'll receive something that meets code. So
Is this tied to ADUs, or is this a totally separate code than ADU structures?
this is totally separate.
Okay.
Yeah. They would interact occasionally if you were trying to do
Right.
above. Yeah, but and then the square footage kind of goes more towards, I don't think we can use this to deny an ADU, I guess, if that's
Okay.
what the thought would be, but yeah.
Any more questions from the commission? Hearing nothing, I will close the public hearing at 6:17 PM.
Since the public hearing is over, can I make a remark?
Sure.
I'm realizing I did a lousy copy and paste job in my staff report. And in the amendment, I left the thing that we're saying to get rid of.
So you need to tell us, we need,
So in the motion, please say something about striking the last line in each amendment paragraph. I just got on automatic, I guess. I have no excuses. I'm sorry.
any more deliberations from the commission? I will entertain a motion to approve the zoning amendment with the caveat that we remove the last line of each section relating to limitations on the accessory structure and exceeding the principal structure for in gross building floor area. Is that?
Thompson, go ahead.
Eden motions.
Second.
Hillary, would you call the roll?
Thompson,
Aye.
Forst,
Aye.
Eaton,
Aye.
Hinders,
Aye.
Samuelson.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for that discussion. Item number 8, city council update. I do not see Andy on the line.
He is in New York.
Okay, so we will not be hearing from him tonight. I do not see Holly. We will be doing item number 9, a community development update. Elliot,
Nothing from me.
Luke,
I don't think we updated you on the annexation stuff the last time we had a meeting. We did go to the city development board again for a smaller annexation of 300 acres off of Delaware, related to a economic development project we're working on. So they did approve that. It has a similar kind of public comment period, appeal period as all woods. So we're kind of in that wait and see moment now. There's a 30-day for that. So early next month, so a couple weeks, that should hopefully be finalized and then go on to the Secretary of State to be approved and officially recorded.
the
So,
voluntary annexation of the property out just
yep,
south and west. Okay,
yep.
awesome. Thank you. With that, our next meeting date will be March 9th at 5 p.m. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motions.
I get a second? Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Carson and Brett, thank you for zooming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.